All right, so you've made it through the first two modules, your first exam, your first discussion post. So now we're going to move into module 3 and start talking about the gods and goddesses, and often their dealings with the demons. So in this module, which is titled Deities from Fire to Devotion, we're going to be looking at some of the earliest conceptions of gods within South Asia, particularly from the context of the Vedic religion. And so from this, we're going to see how the gods and goddesses were associated with natural phenomena like fire, winds, and bodies of water. And we're going to see how the ritual context was built around this understanding. And so once we establish this, we're going to view it through the lens of a shift during the period of the Upanishads, the same period that we've discussed before, and that we've seen the rise of Buddhism and Jainism during the same period. This ultimately changes the direction of the Vedic religion to eventually become what we know as Hinduism. So within this shift, the metaphysical elements that are introduced also lead to a different relationship with the divine, in which the gods are no longer just associated with natural phenomena, but they become to occupy a cosmic or celestial realm. And not only that, but they're able to permeate that celestial realm onto the realm of the gods, and people become devoted to these gods, building larger, more complex, and more permanent ritual apparatuses, particularly of devotion. And so as we see the transition from the Vedic religion to the traditions of the epics and eventually the Puranas, we see this it's building of a devotional relationship with the divine, and a shift in the theology from what you could call a ritual transactional context of the Vedas, eventually to a loving, long-lasting relationship of the Puranas. And so from the Vedic religion, we'll transition to the Mahabharata and Ramayana of the epics, and then into Vaishnavism and explore the early foundations of the Puranas. And we use Vaishnavism as a cipher through which we'll be able to talk about this transition and talk about the rise of bhakti or devotional practices. And in this context, we'll see that the tradition of Vaishnavism emerges, in which devotees worship Vishnu as the supreme deity. This same theological trend will be carried over into our next module, in which we'll see the rise of Shaivism and Shaktism, or those that worship Shiva or the goddess, and compare those to Vaishnavism. So in this section, we're going to have a lot of different readings, more so than the last module, so I won't go through them all. But basically, we'll start off with readings and lectures about the Vedas. They'll be followed with lectures, then the Mahabharata, then the Ramayana, a reading about the rise of Bhakti and lectures about the rise of Bhakti in the Puranas, and eventually into some readings about Vaishnavism. So after our material on the Ramayana, we'll actually have our second Encountering Divinity assignment, in which you'll explore engraving a sculpture from South India Mamallapuram that is part Mahabharata, part Ramayana, and you'll go through and again apply the knowledge that you've gleaned from these different portions on the Mahabharata and the Ramayana to really be able to apply that knowledge and show a logic of how you identified people. Then of course when we move to beyond that into the Vaishnava portion, we'll have another Encountering Divinity assignment in which you look at a dance performance and be able to identify that with mythology from Vaishnavism, again applying the knowledge that you've learned to be able to identify them. And then once you finish that third Encountering Divinity assignment, we'll move to our second discussion post, in which you'll look at the transition from the Vedic religion to the devotional traditions of the Puranas, to be able to talk about how this shifts the understanding of divinity in South Asia, and hopefully incorporating ideas of Chittister and Addo again to make this sort of bring in the larger themes of the class about what is divinity and what does this say about humanity.